220 people. That's it. That's the entire headcount of the company that produced more billionaires, more billion-dollar startups, and more generational wealth than arguably any single company in the history of Silicon Valley. And I'm not talking about Google. I'm not talking about Apple. I'm talking about PayPal, a payment app, a website that lets you send money over email. And the people who built it went on to create YouTube, LinkedIn, Tesla, SpaceX, Palantir, Yelp, Yammer, and Affirm. They funded Airbnb, Facebook, Spotify, and Stripe. And as of right now, in 2026, one of them is the richest human being who has ever lived with a net worth north of $850 billion. Another is the Vice President of the United States, and a third is running AI policy from the White House. All from a company that sold for $1.5 billion in 2002. So what happened? How did 220 people at a payments company end up reshaping the entire world? I spent weeks going deep on this story reading Jimmy Soni's book, The Founders, which was based on hundreds of interviews and 150,000 pages of internal PayPal emails, both Elon Musk biographies by Ashley Vance and Walter Isaacson, and dozens of interviews and articles. And honestly, the real story is way more interesting, way more dramatic, and way more instructive than the myth. So let me break it down for you. It starts with a 24-year-old kid who just dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford. After 2 days. 2 days. His name is Elon Musk, and it's the summer of 1995. The internet is brand new. Most people don't even have email addresses yet. Netscape just went public. And Elon looks at this thing and has a very simple thought. He says, you know what? I could either watch it happen or be a part of it. So he drops out, and he convinces his younger brother Kimball to start a company with him. They call it Global Link Information Network, which, terrible name. They later rename it to Zip2. The idea is simple. Build an online city guide, like digital yellow pages for newspapers. Maps, directions, business listings, all on the internet. Now, here's the thing that gets me. They start this company with $2,000 from Elon, $5,000 from Kimball, and about $8,000 from a friend named Greg Curry. That's it. $15,000 total to start a tech company. And they can't afford an apartment. I mean, literally cannot afford rent. So they rent this tiny Spartan office in Palo Alto, and they sleep there. They specifically chose this office because there was an internet service provider on the floor below, which gave them connectivity. They buy these futons that fold into couches during the day for meetings, and at night they unfold them into beds. They shower at the YMCA down the street. This isn't a figure of speech. They literally walked to the YMCA every morning for months to take showers. And here's the detail that kills me. They only have one computer. One. The computer runs the website during the day, serving actual users, and Elon codes on it at night. His exact words. The website was up during the day and I was coding it at night, 7 days a week, all the time. He couldn't even afford a second PC. And then he adds this gem. I briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she'd have to sleep in the office. One of his colleagues told biographer Ashley Vance, we all worked 20 hours a day, and he worked 23 hours. I mean, think about that for a second. Showering at the YMCA, sleeping on the floor of your own office, one computer between you, going door to door trying to sell businesses on this idea of the internet. And the most polite rejections they got declared that the internet was, quote, the dumbest thing they'd ever heard of. And this guy, this kid sleeping on the floor, goes on to become worth $850 billion. But listen, this is not a story about hard work paying off in some simple, straightforward way. Oh no. It's way more complicated and way more interesting than that. So Zip2 starts getting traction. Musk personally wrote the code for what were essentially the first national maps, directions, yellow pages, and white pages on the internet. Think about that. The first. And the company pivots from selling directly to businesses to licensing their platform to newspapers. This is a big deal. The New York Times signs on. The Chicago Tribune, Knight Ridder, Hearst. By 1998, they've got partnerships with over 160 newspapers. Zip2 is becoming the backbone of the U.S. newspaper industry's online strategy. But here's where it gets messy. When venture capital firm Moore Davidow Ventures invests $3.6 million in March 1996, they take majority ownership and immediately push Musk out as CEO. He's 25 years old. They bring him a guy named Rich Sorkin, a more experienced leader. Musk gets demoted to executive vice president and CTO. His ownership gets diluted down to 7%. 7% of his own company. That's a brutal pill to swallow. You build the thing from nothing, sleep on the floor, code every line yourself, and then the money guys come in and push you aside. Now here's where it gets really interesting. In April 1998, Sorkin arranges a merger with CitySearch, Zip2's main competitor, for about $300 million. And at first, Musk supports it, but then he changes his mind. He organizes a revolt. He goes to the board and persuades them to block the merger and fire Sorkin. The official reason given to the New York Times: incompatibilities in cultures and technology. The real reason? Musk didn't want to give up control to CitySearch. And this is a pattern you'll see again and again. Musk fights to control his destiny. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but he always fights. Then, in February 1990, the board sells anyway to Compaq for $307 million in cash. And here's the thing, Musk didn't want to sell. The board forced it. But in retrospect, that forced sale might have been the single luckiest thing that ever happened to him, because the dot-com crash was coming. It was coming like a freight train. Zip2 had never turned a profit. If the sale had happened even a year later, it might have been worth nothing. The board, forcing Musk's hand against his will, created the capital that funded everything that followed. Hold on to that idea. We'll come back to it. Musk walks away with $22 million for his 7% stake. Kimball gets $15 million. And what does Elon do with his money? First, he buys a McLaren F1 supercar for $1 million, one of the rarest cars on the planet. Only 106 ever made. CNN actually filmed the delivery, and it was Musk's first ever video appearance. In the clip, he says, and I love this quote, "3 years ago, I was showering at the YMCA and sleeping on the office floor. Now I have $1 million car and quite a few creature comforts." It's a perfect quote because it captures the sheer absurdity of the swing. But here's the best part, the McLaren story. He later crashed that car on Sand Hill Road, the famous street in Menlo Park, where all the top VCs have their offices, with Peter Thiel in the passenger seat. Peter Thiel, the future co-founder of PayPal. Musk looked at Thiel and said, "Watch this." Floored it, the car spun out, flew 3 feet into the air like a discus, and slammed into the ground. The car wasn't insured. It wasn't insured. They were both okay, somehow, and they had to hitchhike to their meeting. No joke. That actually happened. It's like a scene from a movie, except it's real life and the two guys in the car go on to be worth a combined $870 billion. Now here's an interesting little thing about the McLaren story that I think is underappreciated. Most people hear this and think, oh, Elon was being reckless and stupid. And, yeah, sure. But look at what it reveals about his psychology. This is a guy who just walked away from 3 years of sleeping on floors and showering at the YMCA. And his first instinct with real money isn't to build a safety net. It's to buy the fastest car on the planet and immediately try to push it to its limits. It's the same impulse that makes him bet everything on rockets. It's the same impulse that makes him pour all his money into the next venture. He doesn't think in terms of preserving what he has. He thinks in terms of pushing to see what's possible. That's not a bug, it's the feature. But the McLaren isn't the important part. What matters is what Musk did with the rest of the money. He took $12 million, more than half of everything he had, and poured it into a new company called X.com, an online bank. This is March 1990, just 1 month after the Zip2 sale closed. And X.com wasn't some small experiment. Musk's vision was massive. He wanted to build a one-stop shop for all financial services: checking accounts, savings, insurance, mortgages, everything. One of the first online banks that was actually FDIC insured. And it worked, sort of. X.com launched in December 1999 and attracted over 200,000 signups in its first 2 months. They were offering $20 sign-up bonuses and $10 referral bonuses, which was brilliant, but also incredibly expensive. Customer acquisition costs hit roughly $100 per user. They were burning cash like crazy, but they were growing like crazy too. Now here's where the story gets really juicy. Because right around the corner from X.com, literally in the same building on University Avenue in Palo Alto, there was another startup doing almost exactly the same thing. It was called Confinity. And it had been co-founded in December 1998 by 3 guys, Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, and Luke Nozick. Now, Confinity's original idea was completely different. They wanted to build encryption software for Palm Pilots that could beam money via infrared ports. You know, you'd hold up your Palm Pilot to someone else's Palm Pilot and beam them money. That was the product. And board member Reid Hoffman questioned the practicality from day one, noting that in any given restaurant, there might be between 0 and 1 person with a Palm Pilot. Which, I mean, he had a point. But then Confinity had a breakthrough. They realized you could skip the Palm Pilots entirely and just let people send money via email. And that product? They called it PayPal. It launched in late 1999, and suddenly Confinity and X.com were in direct competition. Same building, same street, same market, both offering sign-up bonuses, both burning through cash, both independently building the exact same killer app, sending payments from one email address to another. The rivalry was bitter, but Peter Thiel saw the writing on the wall. The dot-com bubble was about to burst. He knew the cash-burning competition between X.com and Confinity couldn't continue without destroying both companies. So in March 2000, they merged. A 5-0-5-0 deal. Merger of equals. They kept the X.com name because Musk believed it had broader long-term potential. Musk became CEO, Max Levchin became CTO, and Musk was the largest shareholder of the combined company. But, okay, so listen. The merger didn't exactly bring peace and harmony, not even close. Inside the merged company, there were these massive fundamental disagreements that sound almost comical in hindsight. The first fight was technical. Musk wanted the platform to run on Microsoft Windows. Levchin wanted Unix, and this escalated to an absurd level. One evening, Musk literally said to Levchin, "You know what? I will arm wrestle you for it. I'm not making this up." Musk won the arm wrestle, and Levchin's response was perfect. He said, "I'm not going to use your physical weight as any sort of a technical decision input." Brilliant line. Musk had his own team rewrite Levchin's Unix code to Windows anyway. The second fight was about branding. Musk wanted to keep the X.com name for everything. He proposed scrapping the PayPal name entirely. Everyone else disagreed. They told him customers thought X.com sounded like a pornography website, which, honestly, it kind of does. But Musk wouldn't budge, and these disagreements festered. By September 2000, a plot was forming. Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, and David Sachs, PayPal's COO, were the core conspirators. They wanted Thiel back as CEO. They secured backing from the board, including Michael Moritz at Sequoia Capital. And here's the detail that makes it a movie. The timing. Musk was on his honeymoon in Australia with his first wife Justine. He had already delayed the trip multiple times because of work. While he was on a beach on the other side of the world, the board voted to replace him as CEO with Peter Thiel. Musk got tipped off when he was copied on an email to the board from an employee who supported him. He immediately cut his honeymoon short and flew back to the Bay Area. But it was too late. The board had made up its mind. Musk told biographer Walter Isaacson, "I was pretty angry at first. I had thoughts of assassination running through my head. But eventually I realized that it was good I got couped." Ashley Vance called it one of the nastiest coups in Silicon Valley's long, illustrious history of nasty coups. Musk himself called it a palace coup. But here's the thing, and this is really important, so stick with me here. Despite being ousted, despite being humiliated, despite having his honeymoon ruined, Musk remained the largest shareholder. He stayed invested. He didn't rage quit and sell his shares. He didn't go to the press and trash everyone. He held on. And actually, this might be one of the most underrated decisions in the entire story, because it would have been so easy, so emotionally satisfying to sell his shares and walk away. To say, "You know what? Screw all of you." But he didn't. He swallowed his pride and he held. And that discipline, that ability to separate ego from economics, is what turned a bitter ouster into a $175 million payday. The company was renamed PayPal in June 2001. It IPO'd in February 2002, with shares surging 54% on the first day. And then, on October 3, 2002, eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion. Musk's 11.72% stake netted him approximately $175 million from a company that had fired him. Now here's what I want to teach you, because this isn't just a cool story about tech history. There's a framework here, a pattern that I've been calling the Reinvestment Flywheel. And once you see it, you'll see it everywhere. It's the pattern that turned a 24-year-old sleeping in an office into the richest person who has ever lived. And honestly, I think it applies to any founder at any stage. The Reinvestment Flywheel has 5 steps. Step 1, build something from nothing. Sacrifice everything to gain initial momentum. I'm going to pause here because this step is more important than it sounds. This is the Zip 2 phase. You have no money, no connections, no credibility. You work insane hours. You sleep on the floor. You shower at the YMCA, and you produce something of real value. For Musk, that was a company worth $307 million, built from $15,000 and one computer. The key insight is that the sacrifice itself is the signal. When people see that you've given up everything, slept on the floor, coded through the night on one shared computer, they start to believe in you, not because of your pitch deck, not because of your projections, because of your behavior. Actions are the most convincing pitch. Musk has said, "I always invest my own money in the companies that I create. I don't believe in the whole thing of just using other people's money." That philosophy started at Zip2 when he had nothing except $2,000 and a willingness to sleep on a futon. Step 2, sell at the right time, even if you don't want to. This is counterintuitive. Really counterintuitive. Musk didn't want to sell Zip2. He fought against the CitySearch merger, then he fought against the Compaq acquisition. The board forced both moves. But the Compaq sale happened in February 1990, right before the dot-com crash wiped out most of the internet companies. If that sale had happened even 12 months later, Zip2 might have been worth pennies on the dollar. The same logic applied to PayPal. Why did PayPal sell to eBay? Because 2/3 of PayPal's transactions were happening on eBay. That's an enormous dependency. And eBay was in talks with Wells Fargo to make their joint venture BillPoint free to all eBay sellers, which would have undercut PayPal's entire business model. Selling for $1.5 billion was defensive, not greedy. And here's what most founders get wrong. They think selling is giving up. It's not. Selling at the right time is how you convert momentum into capital. It's how you turn potential energy into kinetic energy. You know what would have been giving up? Riding Zip2 into the dot-com crash and watching it go to zero. That would have killed everything that followed. The Zip2 sale created the seed money for the entire PayPal Mafia era. The PayPal sale funded SpaceX and Tesla. Each exit wasn't an ending. It was ammunition for the next battle. Step 3. Reinvest aggressively into your next, bigger bet. This is where it gets wild. Most people, when they get a $22 million windfall at age 27, they diversify. They buy a nice house, a nice car, and then they put the rest in index funds and live comfortably forever. Musk bought the McLaren. Sure. But then he took $12 million and put it all into X.com. That's more than half of everything he had into a single startup. And this pattern didn't just repeat, it amplified. After PayPal sold, Musk received approximately $175 million. Most people in the history of the world would retire on that. Live on a beach somewhere. Maybe do some angel investing on the side. You know what he did? He put $100 million into SpaceX. He put $70 million into Tesla across multiple funding rounds, including $6.5 million of a $7.5 million Series A. And he put $10 million into SolarCity. That's $180 million. He reinvested more than his total payout because he used leverage. He literally had to borrow money for rent afterwards. In a tweet, Musk said, "I went down to zero cash or sellable assets in 2008. 2009, had no house, and had to borrow money from friends to pay rent." In a 2010 divorce proceeding, he testified, "About 4 months ago, I ran out of cash." Court filings showed he was spending $200,000 a month while making far less, living off personal loans from friends. And Max Levchin, PayPal's co-founder and CTO, captured this mindset perfectly. In Walter Isaacson's biography, he described a poker game where Musk proceeded to go all in on every hand and lose. Then he would buy more chips and double down. Eventually, after losing many hands, he went all in and won. And Levchin's takeaway was this. It would be a theme in his life. Avoid taking chips off the table. Keep risking them. That's the reinvestment flywheel in a single sentence. Never take chips off the table. Keep risking them. Musk himself explained his philosophy simply. He said he could have gone and bought an island in the Bahamas and turned it into his personal fiefdom, but he was much more interested in trying to build something. And the reason, this is actually huge, the reason he was willing to risk everything is because he didn't view money as the goal. His exact words, "The main reason I am personally accumulating assets is in order to fund this. I really do not have any other motivation for personally accumulating assets except to be able to make the biggest contribution I can to making life multiplanetary. Money as fuel, not as score." That's a fundamentally different relationship with wealth, and it's what allows someone to bet $180 million on rockets and electric cars without having a nervous breakdown. Well, almost without having a nervous breakdown. Now, quick side note here because I want to make sure this lands. When Musk started SpaceX in 2002, he thought the odds of success were less than 10%. He said this publicly. "Starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%, and I just accepted that actually, I'd probably just lose everything, but that maybe we'd make some progress if we could just move the ball forward." Think about that math for a second. He had $175 million. He invested $100 million of it into a venture he believed had less than a 10% chance of working. That's a negative expected value bet from a pure financial standpoint. No financial advisor in the history of the world would approve that allocation. But Musk wasn't optimizing for financial returns. He was optimizing for impact. He wanted to make humanity a multi-planetary species. And he was willing to go broke trying. There's a silly notion that failure's not an option at NASA, he said. Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. Back to the main thing. Step 4. Survive the crisis. Because the crisis always comes, and I need you to understand how bad 2008 was for Elon Musk. This wasn't a rough quarter. This was apocalyptic. SpaceX had just failed its third consecutive rocket launch on August 2, 2008. The first Falcon 1 in 2006 failed 41 seconds after liftoff because of a corroded nut caused by saltwater spray. The second attempt in 2007 made it to space but lost control due to propellant sloshing. The third failed 2 minutes and 20 seconds in when the stages didn't separate properly. Musk had originally budgeted for 3 launches total. He was 0 for 3. His exact quote, "Partway through that year, SpaceX had failed its third launch, and I only ever thought we had money for 3 launches. We were 0 for 3. The Roadster was plagued by production delays and cost overruns. Then, Vantage Point Capital, one of Tesla's major investors, led by a guy named Alan Salzman, tried to remove Musk as CEO during an unofficial board call. Musk's brother Kimball, who was also on the Tesla board, blocked the vote. Then, when Musk desperately needed to close a $40 million funding round in December 2008, Salzman backed out at the last minute, having signed all the paperwork except one crucial page. His reasoning? The round undervalued Tesla. Musk's response about Salzman? He should be ashamed of himself. And the lesson Musk took away: if you have a choice of a lower valuation with someone you really like, or a higher valuation with someone you have a question mark about, take the lower valuation. He compares choosing a VC to getting married, and it's brilliant advice. And on top of all of this, the Great Recession was crushing global markets. And personally, Musk was going through a brutal divorce from his first wife, Justine. Everything was collapsing at once. His words about this period: "My marriage had fallen apart, so I'm getting divorced. The Tesla financing round was falling apart, and we're nowhere near production. And we have the Great Recession. And then, I never thought I'd have a nervous breakdown, but I came pretty darn close. And this one, extremely brutal to say the least. The lowest of the lows. He was down to his last few $100,000. For a guy who had received $175 million from PayPal just 6 years earlier, by Ashley Vance's account, his $200 million fortune was rapidly disappearing with depressingly little to show for it. But here's what happened next, and this is the part that blows my mind every time I read about it. After the third SpaceX failure on August 2nd, about 350 employees watched the launch feed cut out in mission control. The mood was thick with despair. These people had been working 70-plus-hour weeks for 6 years. Careers were on the line. Families had sacrificed. And it looked like it was all for nothing. Then Musk walks out of the mission control trailer. He addresses the company before speaking to the press. He tells them only a handful of nations in human history have ever successfully reached orbit. He notes what they've accomplished is extraordinary regardless of the outcome. He reveals he's secured funding for 2 more launches, flights 4 and 5. And then he says this: "For my part, I will never give up, and I mean never." Dolly Singh, SpaceX's former head of talent acquisition, was there. She described what happened next. Within 5 seconds, the collective energy in the room shifted from despair and defeat to what she called a massive buzz of determination. She said it was the most impressive display of leadership she had ever witnessed in her entire career. The team identified the root cause of the failure within hours, not the weeks or months that traditional aerospace companies take. They announced investigation results by August 6th. And then, they built, integrated, and deployed a completely new rocket in just 7 weeks. 7 weeks. And on September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 Flight 4 launched from Omelek Island and became the first privately developed, fully liquid-fueled rocket to reach orbit. The first in history, achieving an elliptical orbit exactly as targeted, from a company that had been 0 for 3 just 7 weeks earlier. Musk told the Washington Post, "That was a huge upset. Literally imagine like a 10-to-1 odds underdog winning." On December 23, 2008, NASA awarded SpaceX a $1.6 billion commercial resupply services contract to deliver cargo to the International Space Station, 12 flights total. That single contract was the financial lifeline that saved SpaceX. And then, literally the next day, Christmas Eve, Tesla's emergency funding round closed at 6 p.m. The absolute last hour of the last possible day. Musk had restructured the round as convertible debt to get around Vantage Point's obstruction. He told investors he would take another loan from SpaceX and fund the entire $40 million himself if he had to. When investors heard that, they rallied behind him. Musk personally put in $12 million. The other investors covered the rest. On the final call, when the deal came together, Musk broke down in tears. He gave Tesla the last of his remaining cash from PayPal. If that round had fallen through, payroll would have bounced 2 days later. The company would have been dead. Both companies saved within 24 hours of each other, both on the brink of total annihilation. Peter Thiel, who had watched this all unfold from the outside, offered this assessment in Isaacson's biography. Elon wants risk for its own sake. He seems to enjoy it, indeed at times be addicted to it. And Isaacson himself wrote that Musk had an exceedingly high tolerance for risk. He could calculate it coldly and also embrace it feverishly. Reid Hoffman and colleagues at one point planned to title a chapter about Musk, the man who didn't understand the meaning of the word risk. Which, that's kind of the whole point. Step 5. Build the team that builds empires. And this is the one everyone misses. This is the step that separates the PayPal story from every other startup story. Because the PayPal story isn't really about Musk, or Thiel, or Levchin. It's about the ecosystem, the network, the 220 people who went through the fire together and came out the other side ready to change the world, each taking the flywheel and spinning it on their own. So let me show you how this framework played out across the PayPal mafia. Because the examples are insane. Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal and the man who replaced Musk as CEO. After the eBay sale, he takes his roughly $55 million share and goes on a run that is genuinely hard to believe. He co-founds Palantir Technologies in 2003 with Alex Karp, Stephen Cohen, Joe Lonsdale, and Nathan Gettings. The idea: take PayPal's fraud detection technology and adapt it for government and intelligence use. He bankrolls the first $30 million. Named after Tolkien's Seeing Stone. Today, Palantir has a market cap of about $331 billion and holds about $1.6 billion in Pentagon contracts. But wait, there's more. In August 2004, Thiel becomes the first outside investor in a little social network run by some kid at Harvard named Mark Zuckerberg. He puts in $500,000 for 10.2% of the company, valuing it at just $4.9 million. The investment was structured as a convertible note that would convert to equity if Facebook hit 1.5 million users by end of 2004. Facebook narrowly missed the target, but Thiel converted anyway. At Facebook's IPO in May 2012, when the company was valued at about $100 billion, Thiel sold 16.8 million shares for $638 million. A few months later, he sold nearly all his remaining shares for another $395 million. Over $1 billion total from 500,000. That's roughly a 2,000x return on investment. He also co-founds Founders Fund with two other PayPal alums, Ken Howery and Luke Nozek, which grows to over $3 billion under management and makes early investments in SpaceX, Airbnb, Spotify, and Stripe. Reid Hoffman, PayPal's executive VP, he co-founds LinkedIn in December 2002, literally 2 months after the eBay acquisition closes. It launches in May 2003. After the first month, 4,500 members, LinkedIn IPOs on May 19, 2011, making Hoffman's stake worth about $2.34 billion. Then Microsoft acquires it on June 13, 2016, for $26.2 billion in cash. Hoffman joins Microsoft's board. He also becomes an early investor in Facebook and Airbnb. Max Levchin, PayPal's CTO and the brilliant engineer who built the anti-fraud algorithm they called Igor, which was essentially the foundation for all modern online payment fraud detection. After PayPal, he founds Slide, a social media application company that Google buys for $182 million in August 2010. He joins Google as VP of Engineering, but Google shuts Slide down a year later and Levchin leaves. Then he founds Affirm in 2012, the Buy Now Pay Later company, through his startup studio called HVF, which stands for Hard Valuable Fun. Affirm IPOs in January 2021 at roughly a $10 billion market cap. Levchin held 27.5 million shares worth about $1 billion at IPO. Oh, and he also invested the initial $1 million that seeded Yelp when Jeremy Stoppelman and Russell Simmons, both former PayPal engineers, came to him with the idea. Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and Jawed Karim. 3 guys who met while working at PayPal. Hurley was a web designer, Chen was an engineer, Karim was an early employee. They co-found YouTube. The domain was activated on February 14, 2005, Valentine's Day, because they originally conceived it as a video dating site. I know, but they quickly realized no general video sharing platform existed and dropped the dating concept. The first video ever uploaded, Me at the Zoo, was posted by Kareem on April 23, 2005. 18 seconds of him standing in front of elephants at the San Diego Zoo talking about their trunks. That's it. And the Sequoia Capital partner who wrote the first venture check, $3.5 million in November 2005, Roelof Botha, PayPal's former CFO. Google acquires YouTube on November 13, 2006 for $1.65 billion. Hurley's profit, more than $395 million. Chen's, more than $326 million. Kareem took a much smaller share because he had chosen to enroll at Stanford as a grad student rather than being a full employee. But he went on to co-found Y Ventures with Keith Rabois, another PayPal alum, and became one of Airbnb's first investors, putting money in during the April 2009 seed round. David Sachs, PayPal's first COO and one of the key conspirators in the coup against Musk. Say what you want about the politics, the man is a phenomenal operator. He convinced Levchin to pivot from Palm Pilot beaming to email-based payments. At PayPal, he built and ran product management, design, sales, marketing, business development, international expansion, customer service, fraud operations, and HR. After PayPal, he founds Yammer in 2008, an enterprise communication tool that grew to over 8 million enterprise users in just 4 years. Microsoft acquires it in July 2012 for $1.2 billion. Then he co-founds Craft Ventures in 2017, a VC firm that reaches $3.3 billion in assets under management by 2023. And now he's David Sachs, White House advisor on AI and cryptocurrency, leading the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. Keith Rabois, PayPal's executive VP of Business Development. After PayPal, he goes to LinkedIn as VP of Business Development, then to Slide, then becomes a partner at Khosla Ventures, then co-founds Opendoor in April 2014, a home buying and selling marketplace. And guess who the seed investors in Opendoor were? Stoppelman, Levchin, and Sachs, all PayPal Mafia. And I haven't even mentioned everyone. Roelof Botha, PayPal CFO who joined Sequoia Capital in January 2003, put the first venture money into YouTube, oversaw investments in Instagram and Square, and rose to become Sequoia's managing partner. Or Ken Howery, PayPal's other CFO, who co-founded Founders Fund with Thiel and later became the U.S. ambassador to Sweden. Or Premal Shah, a PayPal product manager who went on to found Kiva.org in October 2005, a microfinance nonprofit enabling internet-based lending to low-income entrepreneurs in over 80 countries. Or Luke Nozick, co-founder of both Confinity and later GigaFund, which became a major SpaceX investor. You see the pattern, right? Everyone from this one company goes on to do incredible things. They fund each other, they advise each other, they build on the skills and relationships they forged together. It's not a coincidence. It's the flywheel. And by the way, here's a wild little detail. In 2017, Elon Musk bought back the domain x.com from PayPal. He said it was for sentimental value. The man who got fired from his own company, ousted on his honeymoon in the nastiest coup in Silicon Valley history, bought back the website name 20 years later. Because the X brand never left his mind. And when he bought Twitter in 2002, what did he rename it? X. Full circle. But here's what most people get wrong about the PayPal Mafia. They think it was about talent, like, oh, PayPal just happened to hire really smart people. No, that's too simple. It was about culture, specifically 4 things. First, the hiring philosophy. Peter Thiel and Max Levchin personally interviewed every single final candidate all the way through the IPO. And they didn't hire from resumes, they actively avoided that. They hired from personal networks. Thiel recruited from his Stanford connections. Levchin brought in engineers from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and even from his high school in Chicago. Thiel explained his approach in his own words. We didn't assemble a mafia by sorting through resumes and simply hiring the most talented people. I had seen the mixed results of that approach firsthand when I worked at a New York law firm. Instead, they hired people who would genuinely enjoy working together, people who were specifically excited about PayPal's mission, not just looking for any job. Trust came pre-installed because they already knew each other. As Sony documented in The Founders, Thiel pushed Levchin hard to recruit from his personal network, telling him that friends turned employees came with trust already built in. Second, the radical focus. Thiel had this famous rule where every single person was assigned exactly one priority. Not 3 priorities, not 5 priorities. One, and he would refuse to discuss virtually anything else with you except that one thing. This sounds extreme, and it is. But think about what it does. It eliminates meetings about meetings. It eliminates committees deciding what the other committees should work on. It eliminates the endless prioritization debates that paralyze most companies. Everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to do, and they just do it. And the best person in each discipline was promoted to lead that discipline. Best engineer became VP of engineering. No general managers. No politicians. Third, the contrarian, combative culture. This is the one I find most fascinating. The team argued. They fought intensely. They obsessed. They cared deeply. The culture, as Sony documented, didn't mind friction. They welcomed dissent rather than having everyone drink the Kool-Aid. When Red Herring magazine ran a mocking cover story called Earth to PayPal, questioning whether the company was living in a fantasy, Thiel held up that cover at both the IPO celebration and the eBay acquisition celebration. That tells you everything about the culture. The mockery became a trophy. Fourth, and honestly, this is the one that changed how I think about team building. Journalist Sarah Lacey identified it as maybe the most important factor of all, the confidence they gained from surviving crises together. The selection process mattered. The technical learning mattered. But the main factor was the supreme confidence these people gained from surviving PayPal's near-death experiences. They survived fraud so severe it nearly killed the company. Max Levchin and his team had to invent entirely new fraud detection systems, including pioneering CAPTCHA as a security tool. They survived the dot-com crash of 2000, 2001. They survived hostile internal coups, and they still came out with a $1.5 billion exit. After going through all of that, starting a new company didn't feel scary anymore. It felt normal. It felt almost easy by comparison. Now, here's a number that really drives this home. PayPal grew revenue from about $8 million in Q4 of 2000 to nearly $50 million just 1 year later, while simultaneously shrinking their fraud loss rate. They did that by building systems nobody else had built before. Under pressure, nobody else had experienced. The fraud problem alone was existential. At one point, organized crime rings were draining millions from PayPal through fake accounts. Levchin's team had to invent CAPTCHA, the "Are you a robot?" test that the entire internet now uses, just to keep the company alive. When you go through something like that with people, it creates a bond that doesn't break. It creates a shared reference point for what's possible under extreme conditions. And then after the eBay sale, all but 12 of the first 50 PayPal employees left eBay within 4 years. They had money, they had connections, they had confidence, and they had each other. Levchin invested $1 million in Stoppelman's Yelp. Botha at Sequoia wrote the first check for YouTube. Thiel invested in SpaceX. Kareem was one of Airbnb's first investors. They created a self-reinforcing ecosystem of talent, capital, and mutual support. PayPal alumni have invested in or advised over 400 tech companies. 400. Someone calculated that PayPal produced 3.5 times the result with 1/100th of the people compared to Google, meaning PayPal's success rate relative to producing billion-dollar companies was 350 times that of Google. 350 times. From 220 people. And now here in 2026, look at where we are. In November 2007, Fortune magazine published an article by Jeffrey O'Brien that coined the term PayPal Mafia. For the photo shoot, they gathered 13 former PayPal employees at Tosca Cafe in San Francisco and had them pose in tracksuits and gold chains, like a scene from The Sopranos. Musk wasn't at the shoot. He was busy building rockets, but the term stuck. And now, almost 20 years later, the PayPal Mafia hasn't just reshaped tech, they've reshaped governance. Elon Musk heads the Department of Government Efficiency. Peter Thiel's protege, J.D. Vance, is the vice president. David Sachs is running AI policy from the White House. Palantir has $1.6 billion in Pentagon contracts. The Economist wrote after the 2024 election that the PayPal Mafia would take over America's government. That's not hyperbole. That's a description of what happened. And here's the wildest part. PayPal itself, the company that started it all, was eventually spun back out of eBay in July 2015 at a $47 billion valuation. Some people argue it would have been worth far more had it never been acquired. But without the eBay sale, the PayPal Mafia never happens. Without the eBay sale, Musk doesn't get the $175 million he needs for SpaceX and Tesla. Without the eBay sale, Thiel doesn't get the money for Palantir and his Facebook investment. Without the eBay sale, the YouTube founders don't have the financial runway to experiment. Sometimes the move that looks like surrender in the moment is actually the move that creates everything. That's the paradox at the heart of this entire story. All from a group of people in their 20s who argued about whether to use Windows or Unix, tried beaming money between Palm Pilots, arm wrestled over technical decisions, and figured out how to stop people from defrauding them on eBay. So here's what I keep coming back to after spending all this time deep in this story. The reinvestment flywheel isn't just about money, it's about momentum. Every exit Musk took, every chip he put back on the table, every crisis he survived, it compounded, not just financially, but in terms of credibility, network, knowledge, and confidence. The Zip2 sale gave him the capital for X.com. X.com brought him into the PayPal orbit, which connected him to Thiel, Levchin, Hoffman, Sachs, Botha, and the rest. The PayPal sale gave him the capital for SpaceX and Tesla. And the relationships from that era, the trust, the mutual respect, the shared experience of building something from nothing and nearly losing everything together, that network went on to reshape entire industries, and eventually, the government itself. And here's the thing that ties it all together. Every single one of these people applied the reinvestment flywheel in their own way. Thiel took his PayPal money and bet it on Palantir and Facebook. Hoffman took his and bet it on LinkedIn. Levchin took his and bet it on Slide, then Affirm. The YouTube guys took their PayPal experience and built the world's video platform. Sachs took his operational expertise and built Yammer. Botha took his financial expertise and became one of the most successful VCs in history. Each one of them could have retired after PayPal. None of them did. They all put the chips back on the table. The counterintuitive lesson is this. The safest path is actually the most dangerous one. If Musk had taken his $22 million from Zip2 and put it in index funds, he would have been comfortable forever. A nice life. But he never would have built anything that mattered. If the PayPal team had scattered to save corporate jobs at eBay after the acquisition, the world wouldn't have YouTube, LinkedIn, Palantir, Tesla, SpaceX, or half the other companies we take for granted today. The safe choice, the rational choice, would have produced nothing of lasting significance. Musk himself said it best, and this quote has stayed with me since I first read it in the Isaacson biography. This is how civilizations decline. They quit taking risks, and when they quit taking risks, their arteries harden. Isaacson wrote in his biography that Musk regularly amplifies risk rather than mitigating it, plowing almost all his Zip2 proceeds into X.com, betting his PayPal money on both Tesla and SpaceX at once, and pushing rockets to launch and factories to ramp with timelines everyone else calls impossible. That pattern is the flywheel. Amplify, reinvest, survive, compound. Over and over and over. So here's the question I'll leave you with. And I'm not being rhetorical here. I actually want you to sit with this one. What chips are you keeping off the table? What's the bigger bet you know you should be making but you're too comfortable to risk? What's your version of sleeping on the floor and showering at the YMCA? The sacrifice that signals to the world and to yourself that you're all in? Because 220 people at a payments company decided to keep putting their chips back on the table. They kept reinvesting. They kept taking the bigger bet. They kept building on top of what they'd already built together. And they ended up reshaping the entire world. So ask yourself honestly, what would happen if you did the same?